Welcome to In the Loop Podcast, a podcast that is inspired by the breakaway roping lifestyle. I'm your host, Jordan Joe, professional rodeo athlete, NFR qualifier, and business owner. My goal is to promote the sport of breakaway roping, alongside with celebrating and highlighting elite competitors in and out of the arena. This podcast shares the raw and the real of breakaway roping, bringing you behind-the-scenes stories from competitors, producers, leaders, and the trailblazers, all sharing stories of the Western culture and the lifestyle that they live daily. Join me to talk about breakaway roping, the history, the present, and the future of our sport. If you want to be in the loop, you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us. Take a listen. Okay, guys, so today I'm very excited. We are here with Mandi Holland. I got to meet Mandi last year at the Red Lodge Pro Rodeo for the first year ever in Breakaway, and we hit it off, and we have been prolonging this episode for about a year. Pretty excited. We had a conversation starter about getting some horse papers taken care of, and I said, hey, I haven't forgot about your podcast. So we are gearing up here on this summer rodeo series. We are fixing to head to Red Lodge. 4th of July is fixing to kick off. Mandi, I know you and your committee have been working hard. Plus, you see both sides of it. You're a roper as well as a producer and a pro rodeo producer. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Mandi, thanks for coming to the show today.
You bet, Jordan. And yeah, the world keeps turning, and it seems to be turning faster and faster for us. So we're just holding on for dear life.
No. I know. It seems like, when you want things to happen, everything is going slow. But then when you're like waiting for something, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a year later and here we are. And so anyway, you and I kind of got it kicked off at Red Lodge last year, first year of Breakaway. I remember just the atmosphere, very exciting. We got to rope some fresh calves up there. And just getting to see these different venues, different rodeos, getting to participate, it's pretty exciting. So you and I were actually sitting there watching the start, and we got to talking about what it took to actually get the committee at Red Lodge to put on Breakaway, to have Breakaway in their pro rodeo. And we got to talking about some of these things, and you're like, man, I don't think all these girls, ladies, just spectators in general know all the things it takes to make a pro rodeo at Breakaway. And you're like, I would love to talk about it. So that's kind of why, one of the big things we want to talk about today is just what all it takes to, get a rodeo, to add Breakaway, and at the pro rodeo level, all the hoops that you have to jump through. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I sit on the Red Lodge Rodeo committee, and it's interesting. I've rodeoed my entire life. I've high school rodeoed, college rodeoed, amateur rodeoed, and now we're pro rodeo. And boy, did I think I knew stuff. and then I sit in these committee meetings, and they're a handful of great people, great supporters of rodeo, but they view things very differently. And so our rodeo, as you know, is over the 4th of July. And I started having this conversation in our January meeting about adding breakaway roping. And I had a ton of pushback. No, we can't do it. No, we don't want to do it. No, why would we do it? And so that was the first meeting in January. By February, I visited it again. And I said, all right. And I'm hell-bent and determined to change your mind. So I want you to tell me every no. Tell me every single reason why we can't do this. And so they did. They came at me with, it's 2021, right? So we're post 2020. Everybody's finances are tight. How do we find a sponsor? How do we find the money? What does it take to get cattle? Our slacks are already big, and we don't have lights at the arena. And what does that do to our production time? And do we have the volunteers to stick around to run a bigger slack if you're telling me 100 girls are going to be there? Where do we park all of these extra trailers and people coming in? Because parking is tight already. And so I took all of these big topics of no, and I sat down, and I worked with a stock contractor, Brookman Rodeo, and Ty Hedrick had the cattle for the first year. And I said, okay, what's it going to take? How do we make this happen? And then I came back and I said, well, our slack is big and we already have extreme bowls that we've added on the first. So why don't we split our slacks up? Because our slack is typically on the second, Livingston's on the first, Cody's on the third. And so we as rodeo contestants are trying to make all of this work, right? How do we get to everywhere? And the nice thing about these rodeos is they're literally 50 to 90 pounds apart. That's why everybody loves them.
Right.
And so I came back to the committee in March and I said, okay, here's what I've got for you. And the sponsorship lady came to me and she says, hey, I have a sponsor for you. It's $3,500. It's not the $5,000. And I said, we'll take it. We do not have to be added money, right? Or equal money right now. But we'd really like to be able to showcase our platform. So we ticked off box number 1. So now we have a sponsor and now we have added money. Okay, number 2 was, we're worried about our performance being too long. We don't have lights and we're worried about the slack being too long and where to park everybody. So I started talking to some other breakaway ropers and barrel racers. And I said, hey, if we talked about putting the slack, our own women's slack on the first with all the other rodeos, do you think you guys could still make it? And so we checked off box number 2. So what I presented the committee was, hey, let's split our slacks up. There's nothing saying that you have to run all your events on the same day in the same slack. So what we did is we ran the girls' events, breakaway and barrels, on the first. So that solved our parking issue and it solved our timing issue. So we checked box number 2. And then we talked to the stock contractor and Tyler Hedrick, and he had 100 fresh calves. And so he was splitting those between the calf roping and the breakaway. And so whatever didn't run in the calf roping spilled over to the breakaway. And that producer was local. And so he was able to go and contract to multiple rodeos in the state of Montana and Wyoming to solve those problems too. So slowly and surely, we were checking off every box that they said no to with some critical thinking and some problem solving so that it was a win-win for everybody. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that you approach these committees, you find out why they say no, and you say, great, thank you for sharing that with me. Now let me go see if I can find solutions. And so we ask, we don't tell. And we find solutions, and we're thankful for that, right? And if they still say no, usually it's because they're concerned about conscientious finances too, which is part 2 to this. And Jordan, I'll let you lead that in as far as how do we pay for these cattle? I feel like I'm doing all the talking, and I can do that for this whole podcast, but I'll let you talk too.
Well, I love that you're doing all the talking. I'm used to doing all the talking. So it's a freedom letting somebody else visit a little bit. But a couple things I want to touch on that you brought up there that I really like. I want to circle back to the equal money. So I know that that's been a conversation that has been a little bit of a divided force there, because there's been a little bit of, there's the side of it hey, let's just get it in and then we're going to build it up. Or there's a side of it well, no, why wouldn't they just give us the equal money? We're my husband always says, y'all have equal rights, figure it out. And so,
that's a great point.
Yeah. And I want to say, on one thing I love that you really pointed out was there are competitors that have put on productions. For instance, just like you and I, okay, I've put on a lot of jackpots, but I have not yet put on a pro rodeo. And just I love how you were hey, give me the nose. You weren't oh my gosh, you didn't retaliate and come back and respond to the no's. You said, thank you. I'm going to take these and I'm going to see if I can find solutions and bring those back. I just want to applaud you for that, because that is something I think that in this time frame that we're in this generation, we really need to learn how to do that, where I think those who went before us, have that. But I think that's something that we really need to bring in and learn and say, okay, hey, we're going to get no's. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. So what do you do with those no's? Can you take those no's? Can you find those solutions and then bring them back and then open this discussion? So I want to applaud you for that. But the second thing on the added money, and I want to talk through this that I think people need to understand. Okay, there's 2 ways to go about it. My friend Kaylee Atbauer, she is on the committee at Guyman. And she said, for 3 years, they talked about putting it in at Guyman. And she said no, because she said, I know that if we don't do it right, it's not ever going to be right for y'all. Okay. So I respected her opinion and her way, the way she went about it. This year was the first year they put Breakaway into Guyman. It was equal money. Everything was equal. So that was an amazing thing. But then also there's these time frames where there's like these, I think some of these committees are going to say, hey, like you said, hey, we don't have the 5,000. We've got the 3,500. Let's take a chance. Let's do this deal right now. And then let's step it up, which this year, confirm me if I'm wrong, but we do have equal money at Red Lodge. So I think there's a different way to go about it per each committee.
Correct.
And what the requirements are there.
So that's a great point. And I've heard it both ways. I rodeo in Arizona in the winter too, and in Montana, or, the north in the summer. And so I've had the opportunity to go to watch things in different circuits and how things evolve and what happens in old heritage rodeos and new rodeos and things like that. And what happened in Red Lodge was interesting. So we came in, and then I continued to have pushback from the committee about even putting us in the performance. And so again, we came up with a solution. I said, well, we're doing the extreme bulls. Great new added thing to our rodeo this year. It's on the first by itself. And I said, how many intermissions do you have? Because you have to reload bulls, right? And they said, well, we have 3. And I said, you've contracted a rodeo clown, correct? Yep. Is he doing an act at every single intermission? Like, have you contracted that he has that time? And they were like, no, we don't think so. And I said, well, what about throwing 10 breakaway ropers per admission? I said, now you got 20 girls up that night. You're showcasing an event. You're putting women power forward, plus with this wild bull riding. So you're going to pull people in, right? So this was another problem that we came across. And this will lead into where we're at today. But again, it's finding those solutions. And so what I sold to them is I said, ticket prices. This is what pays for your rodeos. Okay. Your sponsors pay for your added money, but the stock contractors are bid on a contract that the rodeo pays. And that is typically paid for through ticket sales. And that pays for your bucking stock, your rough stock events, and all your timed event cattle. And so if we talk about that, those committees have to come up with money to cover the cattle. And this will be part 3, Jordan, for you and I, as we talk about cattle and pods and trucking and freight and stuff like that. So what we did is I said, listen, you're going to sell tickets to a group of people that would never come to a bull riding event because they don't care. I said, but you're going to sell tickets to, let's say, my family who would never come watch a bull riding, but they want to come watch me breakaway steps, right? And you're going to sell tickets to families that have little girls that want to come watch Jackie Crawford and Martha Angeloni come rope that are never going to buy tickets to a bull riding. And I said, you're opening up an opportunity to sell more tickets to pay for this stuff if you add in this type of event. And so that sold it to them as well, that by adding this in, we have 20 competitors and we had a limit of 100. So now we only have 80 girls that are going to run in slack. So that shortens our time frame too. Okay, so we're talking money. And that's all a rodeo committee is really concerned about at the end of the day, is putting on a good show, but how do we pay for the party?
Well, hands down. I mean, because it's you have all these business people, and I'm so thankful. Like my family were their own entrepreneurs, right? So I've always had a business mindset of, this is my business. How am I going to make money to keep it going, having a business. And so I've always had that mentality in my background. But that's one thing that these committees are formulated of businessmen and women. Okay. Correct. And so we as ropers love to show up and rope for the great big money. Awesome. The calves, the atmosphere, great. We leave there. We don't care. We're there for a day. We're in and out. We don't ever think about how do we get to come to this rodeo every year? Right. Because the money just falls out of trees, or actually they make money on this production. And then that makes them get to have it again the next year, and they're getting more sponsors and all of the moving parts that are going into that. And so at the end of the day, it is the bottom line for these committees is, okay, yeah, we want to have the added money to get the good contestants. Like you said, okay, that's box number 1. We want to have the good stock contractors to have the good stock that also brings in the good contestants, whether it's the timed event and or the rough stock, right? Because a lot of people are coming to watch the rough stock and the timed event is there. The bulls, the broncs, like that's the wild, extravagant, all the things that they want to see somebody get smashed, right? And then they get to see a pretty girl with long hair or something, running down the arena and roping a breakaway calf and running barrels. So that's exciting as well. But most of them come for the rough stock part of it.
Correct.
So all those things, they get the contestants there. And then at the end of the day, like, did I have enough ticket sales to build up our revenue? Do we sell the concessions, the beverages, all of those things to make it to where next year, hey, we're going to have a bigger and better production? So that's all that they're concerned about.
Right. So our ticket sales were up, and we did have a lot more families there due to that. And so the committee came back, the post rodeo meeting, August, September, that we talk about the numbers. And it was such good feedback with the breakaway ropers that they said, all right, you're right, we can do this. So we found out that Red Lodge was selected as a tour rodeo this year, which is awesome. And we're so excited for that. With that, PRCA and WPRA have to put in a little extra money for that. But our committee was so impressed with the caliber of ropers that came, our conduct in and outside the arena, and just what they heard feedback from the crowd, people that come and buy tickets and sponsors, that they came to me in the spring and they said, hey, Mandi, by the way, thank you so much for bringing this in, but you guys are in the perf all 3 days and you're equal money. You're 8,000, just like every other event. And I was like, oh, I didn't even have to ask.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Those small steps where, I try not to promise the world, but, it's just like you and me talked, and I had a card there at Slack that morning, a great big piece of paper with the logo, and I had as many breakaway ropers sign it as I could. And I gave it to the committee, and I said, hey, look, everybody was so glad to be here, and we just appreciate it. And that kind of feedback going back to committees is the biggest thing that we can do.
Right.
It's
the gratitude and the appreciation, and I think one thing I've kind of got some feedback from this year, which, I have to say I'm guilty of this myself, is when we get in there, we're very appreciative, right? We want to be there. We're like trying to grow these strides, make the waves, all the things. But then it's like, instead of remembering and finding that fine line of like, hey, thank you for having us. We appreciate you being here. Like, what can we do to make this better? We're like, we want more. We want more now. Give us more money. Why not us? Why not? And I find myself, even me, being guilty of that, being like, okay, hey, Jordan, my husband is so good at that. He is like really good at perspectives. I'm over here like chirping like a little hammy, and he'll be like, I don't know about that. What about this? And then I'm like, don't tell him, I have to sit back and think like, okay, well, he's right. He's definitely the logical mind of this relationship here, but it's good to have that perspective to where it's like, okay, yes, we do want the fine line. We are appreciative, but we are still trying to grow this thing, but still having that gracious and that appreciation. One thing I love that you did was you took the data and you informed the committee and you taught them, you showed them what breakaway was like, and not just about like roping the calf, but how it was going to bring the community into the rodeo. How it was going to change the atmosphere, how, all the different components of what breakaway can do for this rodeo. I think that is that's a businesswoman thing. And I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you very much. I joke with people sometimes and I say, I show up to the rodeo wearing my cowboy hat this way, but when I go to the committee meetings, I take it off and turn it around backwards, because we have to have a completely different mindset when we go in there to have these conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I'm taking this hat off, and I'm not in contestant mode. I'm in committee mode. And
right.
How do we make this work for a win-win for all of us? And yeah, it's been amazing. And just a fun fact, Jordan. So last year I was prepping for our podcast that never happened because life happens. But I found in my old notes from last year, and because I looked at rodeos from the 1st of August till, and again, this was later, to the end of the season, right? And there was 131 rodeos available for breakaway roping in the PRCA. And I did a fun count just before we got on. In the month of July alone, we have 91 rodeos to go.
Wow. That's
August
crazy.
so far, we have 79 rodeos to go to. And in the month of September, we have 28 rodeos to go to, which I know August and September are going to grow because those approvals have not been signed yet. They've been submitted, but they haven't been signed. A total of 198 rodeos to go to from now till the end of the season in September. I mean, come on. How amazing is that in just 3 years?
Oh my gosh. Well, and I think that
I don't
those
know
are
if
great.
anybody's actually stated the numbers, but I was
No,
like,
that's what I was
look
just
at
about to
that.
say. Those are great numbers to hear because I feel like sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the striving, right? It's like we're striving and we don't look up to realize just how far we've come. And so I love it when you're throwing those numbers out there. It's like, hey, from even a year's growth, this is where we're at. These are the opportunities we have. There's nobody that can say we don't have these opportunities because the opportunities are there. Do we make the choices to go and get them? And so I just want to, anybody who's listening, any committee member, woman, man, children, anybody who's made an effort to help make Breakaway be a part of their event, whether it's a pro rodeo, amateur rodeo, jackpot, what, just thank you guys. Thank you guys for going and doing the work, putting in the time and the effort that you don't have to. I just want to say thank you. But I think those numbers are pretty cool. And speaking of numbers, that's something else that we kind of wanted to talk about. And you and I had a conversation about this a little bit more as we were before we jumped on our call. And we said, one of the biggest questions and I think topics of discussion right now for Breakaway in the pro rodeo is the stock. The tripping stock charge it just varies, in which our stock charge varies, I think, upon different events as well. But we and the trippers are the only two events that have stock charge. Everybody else does not pay a stock charge on their fees. So with that being said, we were discussing the stock charge, plus we have a little bit of different rules. Our rules right now state that we only have to have a third of enough cattle at the pro rodeo events, which we have seen with our enormous numbers. I don't know about up there right now, but down here in Texas and, we're starting to hit these big 4th of July rodeos. Breakaway is one of the largest events, which is really cool and exciting to see. But with that being said, you have 150 girls almost showing up everywhere. And there's a third of enough calves. And so the draw and the calves definitely make a difference and are showing up right now. And then that's something I think we're working through as an association, as stock contractors, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today is the stock and what it costs. One of the conversations you and I were talking about, my husband and I sat down in Reno and visited with John McGill a little bit. And he is over there on the West Coast, does a lot of stock productions over there. And he was telling us that from Reno to St. Paul back to his house, just because he had the extra pot for the breakaway roping calves, was an extra $8,000 in freight with fuel. I think, it's $4 or $5 gallon diesel fuel up there, over there.
Yep.
So that's an extra add on to their freight. And that's the conversation we were having. When you're bidding these rodeos, are you bidding in for freight? And you and I talked about some of these stock contractors had contracts before the breakaway got in there, and they honor these contracts for maybe 2-3 year periods. So let's open that discussion a little bit about the committees paying for breakaway, adding it into their event, not just added money, but stock charge. As a committee charge, and it's more money. It takes more money to have an extra event. So let's get that conversation started a little bit about the stock charge.
Yeah, so I had a great conversation with Kathy Weifrich. She's the daughter of Brookman Rodeo in Montana, and a long standing family of rodeo in the state of Montana, and they hold the contract at Red Lodge Rodeo. And she's also a secretary, so she's very knowledgeable about how all this works. And I had a very long conversation, and I was very eye-opened to how this all works. Because again, when you put on a jackpot, you get your calves, and that's it, right? But with the sport of rodeo, again, they're contracting out. And so I said, well, in your contract, what does that pay for? And she's like, well, we got to pay for the clown unless it's separate. It's got to pay for the announcer unless it's separate. Sometimes they're all bundled together. And then, we never know how many cattle we are going to have to bring until the entries come in. And that scares a lot of contractors because they don't know if they're going to bring 50 calves. They don't know if they're going to bring 30 calves. They don't know if they need 10 calves. And so what she told me is right now, what they quasi charge the committees is $50 a run per calf. Okay. So we're essentially paying half of the stock charge on that calf. And so the committee is picking up the other part of that. And that doesn't even include freight like you talked about. So I said, so Kathy, would it be fair to say that it's more like $75 a run or $100 a run per calf? And she's like, Mandy, I don't even know how to begin to figure that out. And I said, so how do you go about bidding these out? And she goes, that's the scary part for us as contractors, is we don't know if we're going to break even, if we're going to lose money, or we're going to make money, because the numbers are so scary and we don't know. The other, I think, sad thing on this side of it that I learned as well, and this is on the WPRA approval, is our stock charge, which is called a stock charge in quotes, doesn't necessarily go to the stock contractor. Did you know that, Jordan?
I did not.
Yeah. So it can either, you can check the box on the approval form to be paid to the primary contact, meaning the rodeo committee, to spend however they want, or to the contractor. And interviewing some of the rodeos in Montana, I have found that about a third of them keep that money at the committee level and don't pay the stock contractor.
So is the stock contractor doing that? Is it something? Okay, so if they do,
when they bid the
designate
rodeo,
that they can bid the rodeo. So I'm a committee. I designate that the money's going to come back to my committee. Am I bidding that cost in for that stock contractor already, or am I not?
Not necessarily. And I was shocked to learn that, and highly disappointed that the WPRA. So the reason that they started using what they call a stock charge for breakaway roping was to incentivize adding breakaway roping in as an added revenue for the committee. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a misnomer for us as contestants, thinking that we're paying this money to make sure that we get good cattle, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right. So, and I think if you're looking at that, like, let's look at it from a stock contractor's point of view.
Right?
Okay.
Why would you want us?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think there's a little misconception, like the stock contractors hate us. We get to rope crap. You know, we're roping old calves, so on and so forth, which is, you know, a lot of that is the truth. And it is the case. You know, we are roping older cattle. We're roping the cattle that the tie down ropers have roped prior at a lot of these places, unless the committee deems otherwise, and or their special, you know, like setups. Every rodeo is different. So I'm not going to like put that on each rodeo, but a lot of the times, in a lot of the cases, that is the truth. However, if that's my business, I'm looking at it a couple different ways. I'm probably not going to spend, especially with the cattle charges right now, I'm probably not going to spend an extra $600 a head just to have 2 sets of fresh cattle, when I could have 1 set that I bought and continue to rope those cattle and grow them out and feed them and get bigger, as well as, you know, then you come back and you're saying, hey, I'm not getting that stock charge money. So did you bid that out? And if you're not getting the bid, are you really going to do your best job to bring the best cattle for these ropers? Probably not, because you're going to lose money. You know, you're going to lose money on the freight. You're going to lose money on the calves. So I think that that's a great thing to just bring. You know, I don't know that there's really a solution. I think there's so many different, obviously, avenues, rodeos, all the things that go into making, like, what kind of calves, blah, blah, blah. I think that that's something to bring aware, though, for us as ropers to talk to our directors about. If you see bad cattle out there, write them down, take it to the director. And then also bringing that light to the committees of, hey, are we making sure that we're taking care of our stock contractors so that they do the best for all contestants, not just breakaway ropers?
And I think that drives the nail home, right? And I think that's the misconception that we've had. I know that I had it, that I thought, okay, we're paying into this and we're really hoping for the best. And since we are paying into this, my expectation level was a little bit higher. And so I was disappointed. And I talked to Lynn Smith about this, and I said, so, you know, we're out here. Like I said, we got 198 rodeos. Obviously, people are jumping on board. We are still paying for that. And, you know, I know in Cheyenne last year at the general membership meeting, this was a point of conversation, is how long do we as breakaway ropers continue to pay this by ourselves type of a deal when, and I don't know where that conversation leads either at this point, Jordan. I have some opinions on it. I don't know that they're the right view. But you know, I'm not sure what to do about it either. And it comes back to when we talk about stock contractors, I just found out that Wolf Point, which is a $3,000 added rodeo in Montana, was big last year. They have 25 ropers is all after the 4th, which is crazy. And I said, what happened here? And what they did is they only limited to cards only, no permit holders. And so because they were nervous about cattle prices and cattle charge and bringing all this stuff in. And so I'm not sure if we're going to start seeing a shift as to where rodeos start limiting entries and start limiting who gets to go and who gets to be a part of it because of all of this too. And I think we watch these markets for cattle fluctuate and change, and it's always going to be a topic of conversation with us.
Well, and I think that you said it best right there. Like, it's a topic of conversation. I don't know that at this point that there's a right or wrong. Right. I think that we all have opinions, right? We're women and we're strong-minded and strong-willed. So that's always going to be part of it. I think that's how God made us, you know, but it's just like you said, it needs to be a point of discussion and conversation. And, you know, one of the things I'm trying to learn and bring into all the things I do, which I am very hard-headed, so it's been a struggle for me, but talking through these and working through some of these situations, and it doesn't always have to be like this is the problem and we're fixing it right now kind of thing. Yeah. I think it needs to be something that we have to keep discussing. We have to keep this conversation open, and we have to look at it from all views of the contractors, the committees, the ropers. You know, I think everybody has their own skin in the game there, but can you make this as a whole? Does this make or break it? Right. Because that's one of the things that I'm starting to hear from some of these committees, and you let me know what you think about this. Is it was like, at first it was good, we're gracious, but now it's like we're setting our foot down and we're doing some of these things, and these guys are like, whoa, hold on, like, we're just getting started. So I don't want to hit that point where they're like, we don't even have to have you, you know, like if it's going to cost more, then we don't have to have you. And you know, I think that that's something, but we do need to keep that conversation open, because obviously it needs to continue to grow, get better, advance, just like any business, right? That's the goal of business, is 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan, right? We got to continue to grow, but it maybe doesn't always, and I have mixed emotions about this, but it doesn't all have to happen at once, you know?
There's growing pains, and there always will be. You know, we lost a good contractor. We lost Tyler Hedrick last year. He decided not to jump back into the cattle game, and he had great I think he had the best, most even set of calves for up here that we had all year. And so when you went to a rodeo and you knew Tyler had those calves, everybody was like, because it does, towards the end of the season, you and I both know this, it becomes such a drawing contest when you're out there roping against 100 or 75 girls, and there's, you know, 40 calves, and there's only 20 that you can actually win on. And that makes it difficult too. And so when you lose those good contractors, because he's like, Mandi, I went to a bunch and I did calf roping and split the herds and did all of that. I tried to get creative. And he's like, I was charging $40 a run. And he's like, I lost my butt last year, and I'm not ready to jump back in this year again. And so, yeah, you're just like, oh, okay. Does the stock charge need to go up? Right? Like, we're paying more for fuel and nobody likes to spend more money. But if the stock charge goes up, if we pay $10 more, $35 a head, and we make sure that it goes to the stock contractor specifically every time, does that give us better cattle?
Right. Well, and I think that that's a thing that I'm not opposed to, but also my question there would be, that's on top of our fees, right? And so all other events are paying $25 less than us right now. And I know that one time, and my husband told me this just from his experience in rodeoing, once that something goes in, it is very rare that it gets taken out. Mm-hmm. So one of my pushbacks as a contestant would be, if we add more fees,
Right.
and we're paying it on out of our pocket, which I understand the logistics, but if we're paying it out of our pocket, is that going to be a guaranteed? Are stock
Correct.
contractors
We don't know.
worldwide going to bring us good cattle?
Yeah.
And then if they don't, we're stuck with the extra $50 a pop, which at the time maybe doesn't seem like, okay, it's an extra $50, but okay, you go to 75 rodeos.
Yeah.
An extra $50 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not getting that back. That's not going into the pot.
No.
You know, and
Correct.
when you're trying to rodeo and keep your money. So, I mean, just like this conversation, right? Like if we're guaranteed better cattle, I would say yes. But is that going to be something that maybe needs to be a ground rule at your rodeo because you're going to bring a different set for us? Like I know Cheyenne has a different ground rule for us as a committee because they bring the calves, whatever. But maybe that's a ground rule for each rodeo committee that is going to choose to do the difference versus some of these other committees that, hey, they're just going to have the stock contractor bring the same set of calves that we're going to rope, you know, and you stick with the 25. Because I know once you get it in there, you're not getting it out. So is everybody going to follow suit or are you going to suffer as a contestant? Like some of those answers, some of those conversations.
Well, and the reason that they took the stock charge out of the men's events, and I will clarify, permit holders do pay a $10 stock charge.
Yes.
Card members pay nothing. And what happened is they felt like their numbers were going down and they weren't getting the entries. And that's not a problem for us. So that kind of comes back to years like they're probably not going to take it away because we're still entering up because we're so excited that we finally have somewhere to go and compete on a national level that everybody and their dog is entering.
Well, and they're coming behind us too. You know, there's these amateur rodeos that are fixing to happen in Texas. And that's right. Like that's all we used to do prior to this. Right. And so I remember, you know, over the 4th, there might be 100 everywhere, which was huge. There's 150 girls entered at all these rodeos here in the next 2 weeks. And it's not part of the 150 of us that are going north. So they're coming behind us. Those numbers are coming in steady. These youth events are jam-packed full of breakaway ropers. So it's coming, it's building up. So it's not going to be from a lack of entries.
No. And so I think we have to proceed with a little bit of caution and a whole lot of grace, patience, and be grateful and thankful like we always have been. But we also just have to accept the fact that we're all dealing with expenses and we're all going to wade into these waters, and it might not be exactly what you and I want, but it's what's working for the committee or the stock contractor too. And we're in this business together. We're a dance partner together. And sometimes we have to follow somebody else's lead and it might not be our own. And so just like sometimes in a marriage, right? There's your way and my way. And then there's the highway.
And my way is always right. Just for those of you listening, my way is always right.
Right. So a lot of compromise and a lot of grace and a lot of, well, that was a learning experience and maybe we'll try for better next time. So, but to pivot on that too, let's talk about, so if you're a person, Jordan, and you want to talk to a committee, how do you go about that? Like, I've got a list sitting right here. I just ran through, August and September rodeos. One of the things that frustrates me, and I haven't found the answer to this, and I don't think it's all cattle. But our fair rodeos, which are the bigger rodeos up here in the north, for August, do not have breakaway roping yet, and they still haven't added it this year. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I got 9 rodeos up here that are big fair rodeos that I haven't been able to convince yet. So what does that take? What do I do? Lynn Smith, our roping director for the Western region, has been phenomenal in reaching out. She's got this great form letter that she's put together to send to committees. Her and the WPRA have created this great fact sheet about, what does it take to get a rodeo to put breakaway in? And it runs through the basics for committees that don't have a me or don't have a you, that says, well, we do this and we do X and we do Y and we do Z. And it just kind of walks it through them on how many cattle do we have to bring? That's a great point. A lot of these committees have no idea, right? Mm-hmm. How much added money? What about entry fees? Oh, there's a stock charge. what about co-approvals, and so there's a whole bucket of things that a lot of committees are like, well, we just check the boxes. That's what we've done for the past 30 years or 10 years or whatever, and we submit our approval. And but now they have to do a whole separate approval for breakaway roping, because you do a barrel approval and you do a roping approval. So you have two different approval forms. And I think that's a big thing to talk to them about as well. Like if you submit one, you have to submit the other. And then also just trying to say, you don't have to be over the top with this. And we get a lot of questions like, can we limit? Because we are scared. And it's like, yeah, a lot of that is based on WPRA rules of how much added money you have, and how you can limit, or qualifications and ground rules like you just mentioned. And that's what our rodeo ran into. Is one of the things in the first year that we talked about is they're like, well, we know we're probably going to get a big national hit, but we don't want to exclude any of the Montana girls. Like we are a Montana rodeo.
Right.
So how do we make sure that happens? And unfortunately right now, the box only checks, all cards and permits, or just cards only. You don't get to choose. Like, we just really want to give priority to circuit. And that comes down. And so you have to come back into your specific ground rules for some of these things, where they have to add another sheet. And that's where they need a little extra help. And that comes back to your state director or your spokespersons. And those people you really need to lean on. If you are a local girl and you live in a town that doesn't have breakaway yet, but you want to see it happen, but you're not sure, is the WPRA does have breakaway roping spokespersons in every single circuit. And it's really important to lean on them, bring them into your circle and have them talk to these committees. Like, there's so much knowledge and there's so much help out there to educate. And again, not push, but ask and help and not demand,
Well, and the biggest thing I want to touch on this, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Okay, the spokeswomen are great. Like right now, we don't have it set in place to where we have a state director or a circuit director per each circuit in the breakaway, right? They do have that in the barrel race, but we don't have that yet in the breakaway. So in that place, we have our spokeswomen. Yep. Which is a great tool. I'm one of the spokeswomen down here in Texas. I know you're a spokeswoman up there. There's several. You can look online. You can find them. I think they emailed a list with everybody's cell phone numbers on there. Text me after 9. I'm not texting you back, but I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying that the information is out there if you want it. But one of the things I want to touch on, okay, just like if I'm a committee and I don't have breakaway yet, but I want to know these things. All the things you just said, it's fairly overwhelming. And then at the same point, it's like, okay, so I'm trying to have another event and I got to do this and I got to do that. And I don't have time. Plus I'm working full time. I'm doing this for free because I volunteer here. I don't know. Like, can you do it for me? So I think one of those things that we really need to talk about, like you said, one of the things that I've done, I'll just use myself as an example. Sure. And where I've made a mistake is I've wanted something to be done and I went ahead and ran before those who were, I would say superior to me in authority, whether it's your director and or your spokeswoman, and try to get it done myself. Well, then you promise things that maybe you don't know the rules to, or you don't know how it always all works. You haven't went through those forms, like whatever it may be. So then you promise things that you can't keep. And then the committees are like, well, you said this, but now we can't do it. So why would we do it? So that's one of the things I would say, like lesson learned is open that door, start that conversation. If you have a committee and say, hey, like if you're in Montana, Mandi Holland is our spokeswoman. Let me get you in contact with her. She'll help you with their forms and approvals, and or send it to Lynn Smith, send it to Christy Broderick. They are great at what they do. They do it day in and day out. And it's just like anything else. Okay. We're good at what we do because we do it every day. Our hands are on it, right? There's some things that I'm not very good at because I don't do it all the time. I really don't know all the things. And so I'm going to try to pass that torch on to somebody who does know. So I guess what I'm saying is open that conversation to these people, maybe that want to have breakaway. Let's get it started and let's hand that torch over to somebody who knows the approval process, whether it's your director and or your spokeswoman, and let them finish that deal out to where it's not on you. The pressure isn't on you. You're not having to do all of it. And then it can be something that is grown up the right way and the committees aren't promised something that they can't have, or getting feedback. I think that's one thing I've heard, as well as communication on feedback, is some people are going to these committees that are outside of our directors and or members and things like that. And I think they're getting irritated at that, or that's at least what I've heard from feedback from some of these committees, is individuals are going to them, giving them feedback or telling them and demanding what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And some of these guys don't take it very good, and women either. I'm not just saying guys. Women, I know for sure I don't take it when you tell me I'm going to do something. I'm like, yeah, I ain't doing that. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I talk about the fact that I put this through Red Lodge, a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, starting these conversations, I didn't know a lot. And I hadn't been a member of the WPRA. I wasn't a barrel racer. And so I leaned on Jolie a ton. She was our national director at the time. Yep. And, I called her up and I said, Jolie, what are the do's and don'ts? What are the ins and outs? What does it take? What are you hearing back? Help me through this process, because even at that point in the rule book, they were just for kind of like, the breakaway ropings that they had sort of as jackpot, side pot, world final stuff, from old school days. We hadn't really jumped into the PRCA. And so when you try to compare apples and apples with the barrel race, or if you even try to extrapolate from the PRCA side, it was hard. I studied the rule book, and I studied the approval process, and I studied all this stuff, and I still was at a loss of like, I am not sure. And I think that's a huge point is don't go this alone. It's so important to talk to people that have kind of waded the waters. I didn't do it alone. And I talk to Lynn every month, and we talk about different rodeos, and we go through the list, and the other thing that we do too is we talk like, have you already talked to them? Like, I don't want to reach out and bother them.
Right. Again. You don't want to double
talk. Right. I don't want us to look like the left hand's not talking to the right hand.
Right.
And so we have a lot of those conversations too. Of like, okay, what list of rodeos are you working on? What list of rodeos am I working on? Okay, you need help with those rodeos, or I need your help with these rodeos, type of a thing. And really trying to create a team effort behind this so that we don't look like a bunch of random women running around with our hair on fire asking for the world. And that's been super duper helpful. And the feedback that we've gotten has been amazing, from small rodeos to big rodeos. So for example, Lynn wanted to take me along for the ride for the spring PRCA committee meeting that they have in Las Vegas every year. And I was all set to go. Long story short, for those of you that don't know, I herniated a disc in my back. I've had back surgery, so I had to opt out of that. But that's how, we try to stay involved with this. So I sent Lynn with the things that I knew that we were going to talk about at that meeting, and she rolled with it. And then I followed up with her. I said, so, what did they say? What did you hear? What do we need to do? And she was like, God, it was a phenomenal meeting. The majority of committees that were there have already added Breakaway. They're super excited about it. It's going great. The feedback was wonderful. There was a handful that don't have it yet, like Tucson, which, Lynn and I are both scratching our heads like, come on, Tucson, come on. What's the holdup here? How can we help you? Again, it comes down to space and parking, because if you've been to Tucson, it's very tiny. And again, they want equal money. And so they're like, we're not adding it until you guys are equal, and we really want it to be at that level. So again, patience is going to pay off for us in that event. But the great thing is that the feedback is good, and this is going to become a standardized event, and it is great. And so the WPRA and Lynn and Christy put together a phenomenal video as well, that if you're looking to go talk to committees and need to sell it, so to speak, you can get that video. It's super professionally done. It's awesome. It's great. It answers a lot of questions, that committees have. And so the WPRA has been working very hard as well to provide information to committees, and try to make this a seamless process as well, so that they don't feel like, God, it's just one more thing on the list. And a lot of committees, I mean, some of them are getting shamed into it, right? Like they go to the circuit finals as a committee member and they're like, why haven't you added breakaway roping yet? Right. That's happening. That's happening too. And so you have to say, the WPRA has been bombarded by all of us and we're asking for the
because we want it and we want it now.
They're trying.
Yeah. Well, and I just have to say, we're essentially 3 years into this as an entity in the PRCA. And I will say with the separation of the rules from the barrels to the breakaway, there's still rules that we don't have that we need that we're working on. There's still fine lines for the judges out there. I think that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But there's still so many growing pains.
Right.
And yes, at the end of the day, we want to be at the Thomas and Mack or wherever that rodeo is. We want to be equal with the guys and the other ladies, but there's a lot of growing pains as well. We have to have before we can get there. And I think that there's an active force, whether it's a WPRA, Lynn, Christy, you, all the other ladies that are advocating for the sport, advocating to the committees, whomever it may be that are doing their part and their due diligence. One thing I would say is there's empowerment in numbers and empowerment in communication. And I think it's easy to look at this and get bogged down and be like, hands up, not ever going to happen. Like, but just like you said, the numbers, their stats, it has grown tremendously. You look at the team ropers, the barrel racers, when they were striving for the equality, it took so much longer than it's taken for us. And
absolutely.
Just to even, I feel a little arrogant in saying that because it's like, man, they worked hard for a long time and they fought. And I think we have to take that in with a grain of salt and appreciation that we just got to keep doing our work, doing our due diligence, keeping our head down, having these conversations that are not easy to have, but having the conversations, keeping the communication open and not doing it alone, I think is the biggest things.
The other thing I would add in, Jordan, that that's another fun fact for money and breakaway roping, is that a lot of the current pro rodeos have national sponsors, right? That feed money into it, be it Dodge, Ford, Coors, Wrangler, Cinch, the big ones. Not as of currently, none of that national sponsorship money that trickles down from the PRCA or the WPRA goes to breakaway roping. Period.
Why is that?
That is a conversation to have with the PRCA and the WPRA.
Well, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had because I was not aware of that.
Correct. And so again, this is an informational podcast. Like I said, I've learned a lot of things. So when the breakaway is brought into a PRCA rodeo, any sponsorship money that they get from those national sponsors through the PRCA, none of that money comes to our event so far.
Okay.
And again, hopefully time and negotiations will continue to work through that. But that's also something to know that our hands are a little bit tied too when we're looking for that added money, because a lot of rodeo committees get that extra sponsorship money that rolls down through the PRCA for their events. And so far we don't have access to any of that money either.
So at this time we're having to go and actually maintain that added money sponsor individually and bring them in. So does the PRCA, WPRA get a cut? So say Fabrizio Marketing wants to sponsor the breakaway at Red Lodge. What does that look like for me as a sponsor?
Great. That's a perfect question. So as of right now, if you want to be that sponsor, that's it. That money goes 100% right now. And it only goes to the breakaway roping.
So my 8,000, 100% of it goes into the breakaway roping.
And so what happens is when they get the national sponsorship money from the PRCA sponsors, WPRA sponsors, that money that comes into the committee is divided equally amongst all the events.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Right.
However, breakaway is not getting a cut of that at all. So if you want to come in and you want to sponsor the breakaway roping at the circuit finals, or you want to sponsor the breakaway roping at a rodeo, or you want to sponsor the Breakaway Roping at the NFR, your money is 100% going to the Breakaway Roping.
That's good to know.
That is very good to know.
This is a question that I would have for that. I would understand or have a better understanding to know that the money would trickle down into all of the PRCA events. But why does the barrel race get that money as well? Since because I know they're an optional event, and so are we, right? The PRCA rodeos do not have to have barrels and or breakaway. We're optional events still. So why is the barrel racers, and I know that's a tough conversation, and I don't mean it like that, but it's still an open and honest question. Why are the barrel racers getting that money and we're not?
Correct. And so that is part of the negotiations that they had with the PRCA. We need to go back to a few years, and some young people listening to this may not remember the lawsuits that the WPRA and the PRCA had over money and issues of that stuff. And some of that, I think, has some historical precedent set with what happened there.
Okay.
And so if my understanding, and I could be wrong, so if anybody out there knows different, don't be afraid to call me out on this. My understanding.
And I would say, just to add that in on any of these things, we're right. trying to learn and we're trying to talk through this. We don't have all the answers, and I'm learning. I'm not perfect, turns out, so, but if there's anything that you need us to know, please contact us directly and or let us know, because we're just trying to figure this stuff out.
Right. And share what has been told to us or what we've learned. So my understanding is that if a PRCA Pro Rodeo event includes barrel race, then they have to include them in that trickle down money.
Okay.
But so far, we're not considered a standardized event. And so we're not included in that.
Yet. We're getting there.
So.
Well, and I think that's great to know, but it's a great question to start, and work through that thing.
Right.
But it is good to know as well, if you're a sponsor, I hope that Fabrizio Marketing gets to sponsor the Breakaway for that much one day. But, if you are a sponsor, 100% of your sponsorship money is going to the Breakaway. And I think that there's a big support group for us as Breakaway ropers and people who are behind us. And so I think knowing that is good as a sponsor to be like, heck yeah, 100% of it's going to y'all. That's where I want it to go.
Yeah. And if there's anybody out there listening that has a large checkbook, is on a national level and wants to put their stamp nationally, God bless the Cowboy Channel and bringing us out there into a huge national public view. And I think that also is attributing to our really fast growth as well. Mm-hmm. If anybody's out there listening and they want to become, a Breakaway specific woman event only specific sponsor, local, state, circuit, national level, bring it. It's open, it's available. You will become the title sponsor for this. And that goes for the NFR right now. If you want to be the title sponsor, you can be the title sponsor, and it is 100% going to Breakaway Roping, period. Well,
and if you need a write-off, I'm a Breakaway roper. It's 100% write-off. Fuel, fees, you name it, I'll do it for you. Yeah. I'm here. I'm ready. I'm ready to help you out with that pocketbook.
And I know one of the things that I tried really hard last year while I was rodeoing, and I know you guys on the national level are really good at doing Instagram and Facebook posts. I don't do TikTok, just one of those things, but of calling out your sponsors. But one of the things that I started doing at every single rodeo that I went to, and they'll usually list them at the office, or you can find a committee member and you can specifically say, who donated the added money for the Breakaway? Who's the sponsor for the Breakaway, or who are the sponsors? Right. And I would write those down, and I'd get back to my trailer and I'd look them up on Facebook, and I would try to tag that company or that little store or that ranch or whoever it was, with me at the rodeo, win, lose, or draw. Maybe I missed and I didn't want to put that on Facebook, but maybe I'd take a shot of me in the arena with my horse and, or some other Breakaway roper, just a still shot picture, just something, and say thank you to those sponsors, because, they're looking for some kickback. They're looking for notoriety. And just even those local guys really appreciated the fact, like, I got a couple of Facebook messages like, wow, thank you so much for including us, in your post, and just doing it local too. There's always that saying with us, shop local, keep it local. And we have these small hometown local sponsors too that we can't forget about. And those are the ones, those are the mom and pops that are.
Well, those are the ones that make it happen. And we need to make sure as ropers, and I know there's a lot of ladies, men included, everybody out there listening that's on social. So, if you have time, it doesn't take, an extra couple clicks on your ads and go ahead and tag those sponsors and just let them know that you appreciate them. And it doesn't have to be, all the time, every time. But if you go through Red Lodge and you're fueling up or whatever it may be, that's one thing I love about Breakaway Ropers is we're not going to, my husband, this is a funny story. Like he'll run his truck on like maybe half a tank or less low on def. With me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get there. I'm going to fill it straight up. Right. So I'm going to go to town. I'm going to get my def and I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to be full. And, my traveling partner a little bit, Jamie Markham this year, she's the same way. She's more anal than me. I want to make sure that that's noted, but, she'll pull into town and we top it off. And so every town that we went to got a little bit of our money. Right. Yeah. And so that's one thing that we can give back to committees is these girls are going to spend money in your town, whether it's on fuel, food, whatever it may be, the necessities, they're going to spend their money in your town and that gives back to the town. And that's what makes like we were talking about earlier, that bottom line really hit home.
Yeah. And it doesn't take a whole lot. And like I said, did I have to take maybe 3 extra minutes, but sometimes you're standing in line waiting for the draw or whatever. And I've also told committees too, like, hey, don't be afraid to post your sponsors outside right next to the entry fee list, right? Put it out there for us so that we know.
At Pecos, I thought something cool that they did. They had the hospitality room for everybody to eat. And on each of the paneling doors, they had listed all of their sponsors on the hospitality. So you walked through there and you saw each and every one of the sponsors that were a part of that rodeo. And I thought that was really cool to just showcase those people. And then every time you walked by there, you saw who made that rodeo possible. So I thought that was really neat as a committee to do.
Right. And how much time does it take for us to like, especially if it's big like that, you just turn around, selfie, hey, look, there's my sponsor. Thanks so much. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those little mom and pops were like, oh my God, I was on so, and they just think it's great. And so, maybe you're not like me, and maybe you're not old school with a mom that still makes you write thank you cards and saying cards, so I have a stack of thank you cards.
I've got my thank you cards right there too. Yeah.
In my trailer with my stamps. And so I just, write them down, right in my trailer, like, okay, paid my fees, check my draw, go back. Okay, here we go. Done and done. Right. But social is so simple nowadays, and everybody has their phone on it. And just a couple minutes.
Find a young kid to take a picture of you with those sponsors. It'd be great. But hey, could you take my picture?
Hashtag Red Lodge Rodeo. Hashtag 36 feet.
Yeah.
Those little things that those committee members they really come back and they're like, oh wow, this and that.
Thank you.
That feedback is super great when you go back to those post rodeo meetings and they're like, oh, did anybody see that? And that's really, really cool too. So little things.
I love it. And the little things. And that leads me to my final question and I ask everybody on my podcast, Mandi, if you could go back and you could tell your younger self something, what would it be and why?
Okay. So I knew you were going to ask that because I do listen to podcasts. Yesterday I was traveling home and I listened to Farron's and Amy's and because I have Montana, we drive a lot. And I knew that we were going to do this and I thought, oh God, I gotta have an answer.
Think about this.
One, right. This is what I would tell myself. We live in Montana. We're a mountainous state. Our family's goal setters have been forever and ever. And so in our family, we talk about climbing mountains. We're surrounded by mountains. We hike, we fish, we do all of that. And sometimes we set goals, right? And they're the top of the mountain. And sometimes the mountain's steep. Sometimes the mountain's not as steep. Sometimes we start climbing the mountain and all of a sudden it gets a lot steeper than we thought it was going to be. And it would be really easy to turn back around and quit and be like, too hard. And I would tell myself, keep climbing that mountain, get to the top because the view from there is unbelievable.
I love that. Well, and I think that applies to, every situation in life is different. And I think, you're saying every mountain is different and just getting to the top. One of the things I got to do last year that was fun when we went to Salt Lake, we had a few days we laid over and we actually went and hiked to the top of one of the trails, and we got to see the waterfall up there. And about halfway, JJ Hampton went with me, and she was not saying nice things on the way up there to me, but we got it. We made it up there. But man, at one point she was like, I think we should just go back. And I'm like, no, I'm seeing this waterfall. Right. And it was like barely even trickling. It was like at the end of the year, and it was not, but I was like, just the state of accomplishment to get to the top. It was pretty cool, and it was like, okay, we did it. And we sat up there and we soaked it in, but then going back down wasn't as hard, Right? So I love that.
Well, and I think really to follow that, right, you get to the top of this mountain, and then you look across the horizon, and you take a minute to just say, wow, look at what I just did. And then you look out there and you say, where's my next mountain? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's when you set your new one. And you don't take a big break. You just keep trucking. Like you said, you go down, but find your next mountain. And if you get stuck or you get in a rut, so to speak, just remember, reach out. There might be a mountain that you didn't even see that was out there. And I just think it's really important that we always keep striving for greatness. I don't care how old or how young or what you do in life, but there's always a mountain for somebody to climb.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's great advice. That's the very first time I've ever heard that. So I love that.
Good. Well, guess what, Jordan? You want to go see a cool waterfall that's going to be ripping? I got Icebox Waterfall in Red Lodge.
Okay. Well, count me in. I'm coming to see you in Red Lodge. I'm pumped about it. We'll be there on the 1st in Slag. But Mandi, thank you so much. Thank you for not just being a roper, but being a producer, a PRC producer. And thank you for the information today. This has been, I try to break it up and have informative podcasts, all the things we do. But, to continue to move forward, I think we have to hear information like this and start these conversations. And I just appreciate you for bringing the truth and being raw and real and having these conversations with us today.
Yeah. And reach out. Like Jordan said, our information is out there and available. If you see me at a rodeo, don't be afraid to say, hey, I got a question. And I'll say, I might not have the answer, but we'll work it out together and we'll figure it out.
And that's what started our friendship and this conversation. And so I'm very thankful for that. But I would say, ask the questions, ask the hard questions. And there might be some hard answers in it, but like you said, you take the no's and you get solutions and you go back and climb that mountain. So Mandi, thank you so much for joining us today. And I appreciate it. We'll see you down the road.
Okay. See you later.
Thank you for joining us on In the Loop Breakaway Roping podcast. I truly appreciate all of your loyal support. Don't forget to leave me a review, share this episode with a friend, and if you have any questions, I want to hear from you. Email me at jordan@thebreakawayropingpodcast.com. Go check us out, sign up for our newsletter, get our email alerts, text alerts, and all things breakaway roping. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you down the road.